Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time For This? The series that looks at old and new video games, both indie and AAA, to help you figure out whether or not you actually have the time to play it, finish it, 100% complete it, or just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. We're all busy in life, jobs, kids, classes, exercising, you name it. So let's take a little time right now to look at Amnesia the Bunker and figure out, do I have time for this? Today we're going to take a look at the survival horror sandbox game Amnesia the Bunker, a fresh take on a franchise that helped develop modern horror games into what they are today. A slight deviation from the formula frictional games usually makes, the Bunker emphasizes gameplay over scripted moments in the hope that you will replay the title multiple times due to some randomized elements of the game. The fourth entry into the Amnesia franchise sees you in the trenches during World War I, in the muddy boots of Henri Clement, a French soldier who heads out to help his friend on the front lines, only to find himself injured by a mortar shell. Upon waking, Henri finds that the bunker he is being brought to for safety is anything but safe. A gruesome monster known as the Beast stalks the halls, feasting on any soldiers making just enough noise to attract its attention. Whilst you may think this setting has been done to death in games, I believe we need more World War horror games, and this game is a great showcase as to why. Leaving behind the scripted chase sequences and walking simulator gameplay which popularized the series, the sandbox elements and realistic interactions in the environment create not only a new direction for the franchise, but a good foundation for other horror games to build on in the future. Amnesia the Bunker takes one of the most horrific real-life events to experience, adds in a supernatural unstoppable enemy, then drops you in one of the most intense and isolating environments you could imagine. Be careful where you step in the dark, as when the real blurs with the surreal, you are never truly safe. Honestly, I think the marketing on this game undersold how much potential the Bunker has to reshape modern horror games. Whilst a variety of options available to you aren't anywhere near the level of, say, Tears of the Kingdom, having more freedom to carry out your objectives in a fairly unstructured way really felt like this was my experience, and with the introduction of randomized elements, escapes a lot of the issues we see in modern horror. So, let's start from the beginning. Dropped into the titular bunker, all you are bid to do is find a way out. The one alive human you do find instructs you to find some dynamite and a detonator to blow open the entrance to the bunker, then the rest is up to you. Armed with a pistol and an extremely limited ammo capacity, you are left to defend yourself by improvising weapons, by crafting things together, or finding throwable items in the environment to bypass obstacles and keep away the beast whenever he comes knocking. The game really does leave you with this, okay, now figure it out, mentality almost immediately from the offset. You have one save room that acts as the central hub and the only real map you'll find, then it's up to you to figure out what to do to get the items you need to escape. Like most horror games, this does boil down to get X item to unlock the way to Y item, but with the sandbox style layout of the bunker, you can reach each item in a variety of ways, depending on how much risk you're willing to take when drawing out the beast. For instance, you can come to a big warehouse filled with wooden shelves you need to navigate. You can either walk around quietly through the maze of shelves, you can use grenades or fire to clear out all the obstacles out of your way, or you could fire one single gunshot and have the beast sprint in and destroy it all trying to find you, leaving a nice open path for the future. Whilst I often took the chicken's way out and stayed stealthy, the fact I could open shortcuts by luring the beast or smashing down doors was a breath of fresh air considering the amount of what I call corridor horror games, where you just walk from point A to point B collecting items between jump scares. How does this beast measure up against the great pursuer enemies in gaming, you may ask?
Does a man have teeth the size of axe blades? Or ears like terrible tombstones?
Well, from a design point, I'd say the beast is generic monster 101, and the way his AI works is more or less the same as any other pursuer you'll find in a game. The more or less one-hit kill nature of this type of enemy, I've always found to be a bit of a pain in games, and to be honest, it's not really any different here. Luckily, you're never too far away from having saved if you're saving whenever you hit the safe room, so this avoids the usual trappings of having to replay large sections. When you have the generator working, the beast feels a bit more like another mechanic to progress in the game. allowing you to manipulate his AI to clear paths or enemies, or just running and hiding when the lights start flickering. The true way it becomes scary is when the lights go out. There's a generator in the bunker, which you need to feed fuel in order to keep the lights in different sections on. Often you will find a big breaker switch on the wall to turn the lights on for a specific area, and trust me, you want the lights on. The beast typically hides away from the lights whenever they are on. He will remain in his little hidey hole unless you make a large amount of noise by smashing something, shooting a gun, or blowing something up. Once the lights go down, you're screwed. This guy will not let up on hunting you down and making you his next snack. He will spend forever trying to find you before moving on, and will gladly sprint after you throughout the corridors. Because of the generator being in the safe room, you obtain a pocket watch to set in time with the fuel gauge. So even though you're not in the generator room, you can keep an eye on the time you have left. The best and most dynamic part of the horror aspect of this game is the generator. You will find yourself having to use various tools to overcome obstacles and get so absorbed in what you're doing that you will actively forget to look at this watch. As there's no HUD in Amnesia, you have to equip the item to check it, and when you've been using some tools, hiding from the beast, then you pick up what you came for, only for the place you're in to be plunged into pitch black is incredible. The fuel you have will be randomized, and the pace you go through things will all be different, resulting in different atmospheric horror moments for different players. Truly ingenious. There are also various environmental hazards you can run into, whether it be some mutated rats gnawing on a corpse, or a tripwire trap set up by your comrades trying to ensnare the beast. In some cases, even the doors can be booby-trapped with flares or hand grenades, so as you open the door, fire ignites or some gas is released. Again, the way you deal with the hazards is entirely up to you, depending on how much noise you want to make and how fast you want to get in there. The craziest thing about these hazards, and possibly the most interesting aspect of the game from a design perspective, it's all randomized. Whilst the layout remains the same, the hazard locations, tripwire bombs, traps, and items are all completely random. Where I might find a corridor filled with rats on playthrough 1, you might get a room filled with explosives. This is honestly what baffles me about the press this game has received. People should be shouting this from the rooftops as the next big innovation in the horror genre. Dynamic obstacles and scares tailor-made for the player, when no two runs are going to be the same and everyone is going to have a completely different experience. If you were to watch a stream of this game, you could still play it and have a fairly different experience from the streamer. This is by no means as fleshed out as it could be. As I said before, the physics systems and options aren't quite at Tears of the Kingdom levels, and the general objectives and story will play out the same, but it's a great start for future horror developers to build on, in the same way Amnesia: The Dark Descent was. Whilst the bunker is ahead in terms of its gameplay, the same can't be said for its visuals or its story. From a visual standpoint, it looks a little bit less than I typically expect from something like a Resident Evil, big budget horror game. But what it lacks in visual fidelity, I'd say it makes up for in art style, world design, and atmosphere. The opening scene and tutorial before you reach the bunker looks very rough, but Frictional Games plays to its strength by spending as little time as possible out here and ushering you into the bunker action as soon as it can. Inside this hellhole is claustrophobic, cold, and so unbelievably dark. I know you'd expect it to be dark in an underground bunker, but without your trusty wind-up torch, it really is pitch black in there, and I found myself a few times almost face to face with the beast as I try to find my way with no generator power. Frictional nails this world design perfectly, and generates a great sense of immersion by having essentially no HUD unless you're checking the notes in your inventory. As you'd expect with everyone in the bunker being dead, the majority of the storytelling after the introduction is done via files and photos littered throughout. It was a good twist to have the journal entries of the main character and his friend to be fully voiced, but I feel as though we could have had a few more of them voiced just to flesh that out a bit. The photographs you can find both explain gameplay mechanics such as using bolt cutters to disarm tripwires, and act as world building, showing wounds from the war above alongside damage done by the monster itself. The setting in this installment of Amnesia is the true star of the show. As I said earlier, the majority of games set during a war are FPS games, putting you into the shoes of G.I. Joe gunning down hordes of German soldiers. But there is merit to showing that these wars were in fact horrific, even without malformed monsters hunting you in the dark. This game reminds me a lot of Death Watch, where a group of soldiers during the war experience ghosts and spirits in the trenches. I think the duality of real-life horror against supernatural horror doesn't get explored enough, and it's great to see here, with you still experiencing shells landing overhead and gunfire at certain points in the game. So, let's get down to it. How long does this game take? If you're looking to do just the main story, a few achievements, and having a few setbacks, you'll be looking at around 6 hours on your first playthrough. If you decide you're going to get all of the achievements and collectibles, you can push this to around 11 hours depending on whether or not you followed a guide. This put it around the same sort of length as A Machine for Pigs or Dark Descent, the previous entries in the franchise, but significantly shorter than Frictional's last game, Amnesia Rebirth, which sat at around 13 hours for completion. I personally don't think this shorter runtime is a detriment though. I don't think there's anything worse than a horror game that overstays its welcome, and The Bunker was, in my opinion, the perfect length for the asking price of the game. Rather than charging the average £60 or $70 for this release, it sat at around £20, which is a much more palatable price for the length. It's clear that Frictional Games wants you to use the randomized aspects of this game to replay it. With horror games there's usually not much point in replaying, but I think they've addressed that aspect somewhat with this new gameplay twist. The only achievement to call out here, apart from the standard collectible ones and a few missable ones, is that there's a speedrun achievement. Described only as complete the game faster than any developers, it's unclear what time it actually is, but it is beatable using a guide within about 30 minutes. With there being a few run-specific achievements, such as complete without saving, guides will recommend you complete the game about 4 times in total. Honestly, I feel this game respects your time fairly well due to the structure it employs. Each section of the bunker almost acts like a level, and with full exploration taking your time, it's only about half an hour to an hour at a time. This is perfect for people with only a short time to play. Although horror games are usually best in one sitting, there's definitely a good design here to treat each section as its own individual play session. Ultimately, I can definitely recommend Amnesia the Bunker. While some people may be put off by the hide-and-seek nature of Pursuer-style horror games, this installment builds on the original horror tropes it created back in 2010 to deliver an experience with so much freedom and agency any horror fan should play. As I said earlier, these concepts aren't completely explored, but they offer such a good template for future horror games and games in this franchise to build on. I'm genuinely excited as to what comes next. They added a mod section where people can create their own custom experiences, but even without this, the randomly generated nature for items and hazards allows the game to create bespoke horror scenarios and elements that frankly more horror developers need to take note of, and the fact nobody is talking about this is criminal. Although the story falls a bit flat, and there's a bit more of a tell don't show approach to the world building in the form of journal entries, Frictional Games has crafted a compelling World War I experience. Featuring dynamic random situations, replayability, respect for your time, a seldom used in horror setting, and an undeniable atmosphere, Amnesia the Bunker is one of the best horror games of 2023. With the completion not taking too long and being available on Xbox and PC Game Pass, for me this is worth picking up if you're a horror fan and definitely worth a try if you're new to the genre. So, do you think you have the time for Amnesia the Bunker? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game, alongside a bit more of a deep dive on the time you have to invest, so you know what you're getting into before you load it up. Because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you subscribe, I'm looking to put out regular content like this alongside some more in-depth video essays, so stick around, and if you have any requests on future videos, just drop them in the comments. And finally, if you want to come hang out and chat with me, you can find me over on twitch.tv/GraciousRhino every Sunday. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.